Hey everybody, John Felt here. This is a Blue Water Outlook Weekly Weather Briefing. You know, we're getting within sight of March, and the 3 meteorological months of winter end at the end of February. A lot of talk about a lost winter. I put out something about the Great Lakes this past week, a record low amount of ice, really no ice. Temperatures so mild in areas like Minneapolis and Chicago and other areas that are normally the cold spots this time of year. So the question will be, will that continue as we get towards the end of February? I'll be talking about that and more in this week's briefing. Well, first off, here's the latest weather map. Looks pretty quiet. Had this area of high pressure push through, and that brought in some cooler air and drier air behind this front that brought a lot of rain over the southeast U.S. Matter of fact, you can see where the wet spots were last week. It was the Pacific Northwest to the west of the Cascades. We had lots of heavy rain over the southeast, continuing the El Nino winter. And then we also had some of the first snow of the season for some spots in this area right here. Now, if you want to talk about snow, this was the snow we had last week. A band of snow here, a band of snow here, but it really wasn't widespread. It was more spotty. But in some areas, especially down here, that was the first significant snow of the season. This was the satellite picture this morning, and you can see the rivers really clearly in that snow with those clear skies. Now, temperatures last week, as we've seen, have been unusually mild, especially again over Minnesota, Wisconsin, parts of Iowa. That's the area that is really, this area, if you're up here, it feels more like a winter, maybe down here. Just really unusually mild. Now, right now we have a stable air mass over large parts of the nation. So quiet weather, at least the start to the week. Where do we have higher dew points? Well, California, that's an area we're going to be watching this week. And also Florida with that boundary. You can see the boundary pretty clear right here. Dry air behind it and the really moist air ahead. Now, as far as rivers go, if we look at areas that are running on the high side, we see California, we see parts of the southeast. But I wanted to show you sort of looking at the main stem rivers here, upper Mississippi, the Ohio, and the lower Mississippi. And they're all beginning to fall pretty significantly now. So this is the time of year we start thinking about spring snowmelt flooding. Well, first of all, there's very little snow on the ground. If we take a look at it here, this is the snow on the ground. And I've been talking about all these different holes here. You know, there's no snow here, there's no snow here. So when that starts to melt, it's going to be more efficient at melting because these areas are going to warm up quicker and help to melt that other snow. Now, yesterday, Saturday, there wasn't any melting at all because it was so cold. That's going to change very quickly. But without much snow on the ground, and frost is another thing we need to talk about. With milder temperatures, whatever melts can soak into the ground. Rivers are falling. Lots of signs point to a reduced potential for snowmelt, if any, this season. Okay, so let's dig into the forecast, and I want to show you here the polar vortex, polar winds. This is the 0, so anything above that is stronger than normal. This is sort of the average right in here. So what we have here is I don't see any signs. We'd want a negative here if we were seeing a polar vortex weaken and allow cold air down. So I don't see any sign of that. And if we look at the forecast here, this is the remnants of that cold air moving into the east. But by later this week, I see a big area of high pressure that extends over the good part of the nation, and then a little bit of a dip in the east. I want to go out a little bit further here and show you here by a week from today a very intense ridge of high pressure over the central or the western and central U.S. Maybe still a little bit of a dip in the east here, so we'll see about that. That's still a week out. So what does it mean for temperatures? It means that temperatures are going to be warming over a large part of the nation, with the exception of perhaps the west coast due to clouds and rain. But right over the middle part of the nation, we are looking at temperature departures 10 to 15 degrees or more above normal as we get towards the end of February and maybe into early March. Let's take a look at Chicago, for example. The red line indicates the normal high, and look at the actual highs. Maybe the normal high 36, we could be 15 to 20 degrees above that. So, like I said, a lot of areas that are used to this time of year being pretty dismal and brutal, as far as temperatures go, look pretty nice. Now, as far as precipitation this week, really I think the focus is going to be on California, both at the coastal areas and higher elevations. This will be yet another push of focused moisture coming from the tropical Pacific, that warm moisture with El Nino, pulling up in here and enhancing precipitation. Also, parts of Florida could be wet, South Florida in particular. I don't see much snow, maybe at higher elevations. Again, I think the Sierras are going to be the area that are going to be under the gun for the most snow, and maybe some Lee effect snow. Remember, those Great Lakes are still unfrozen. So as far as the threats assessment go, flooding rain in California at lower elevations and at higher elevations, high risk of snow. Okay, now let's take a quick look at week 2 here, and I wanted to show you here, I have a little bit of a question mark that we might get a backdoor cold front and sort of carve out parts of the eastern, northeast U.S., maybe with some cooler air, but that's a ways out there for right now. Let's just sort of look at most of the nation. Central part of the U.S. unusually mild, and the west on the cool side, and we could go back to the Pacific Northwest in week 2 being on the wet side, and here's another area. This area's been dry, so it can handle that rain. The outlook for March just came in, and take a look at it here. For your area, some things of note. This is our El Nino track, and for temperatures, this is our also El Nino. Now, keep in mind, El Nino is going to be waning in the next couple months, but there's usually a lag. So I think into spring, we're going to be still looking at El Nino. So it looks like some really mild weather over large parts of the nation, rounding out February and heading into March. Have a great week. Take care.